Crowded Booth with Bryce Kuhn. Happy Monday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Crowded Booth Live. Bryce Kuhn alongside Ralph Leary, as always. And we have a special guest waiting in the wings that we're going to get to here in just a second. He hasn't been on the show in a long time, but, you know, it's good to have him back. And Georgia fans are probably not glad that he's back to talk about what he's going to be talking about, but it indeed will be a conversation that we're going to be talking with Palmer Thombs a little bit later on. But, Ralph, once again, we want to let everyone know if you're watching live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, we appreciate that. If you're listening on the radio throughout East Alabama and West Georgia as well on Tuesday, this information we're going to talk about tonight still pertains to what's happening. So, Ralph, without further ado, let's welcome our guest in, Mr. Palmer Thombs. Palmer, how you doing, my man? It's been a minute, but you're back, and you're not back with good news. I'll say that.
Hey, Georgia made the playoffs. That's about as good of news as you can hope for the Bulldogs at this time of the year. You know, obviously the SEC championship loss is disappointing for Georgia fans, but I put it this way to several of my friends who are Georgia fans on Sunday after the playoff announcement came out and Georgia was announced as the 3 seed. It's a new season for the Bulldogs, and nothing that happened before that point matters once those rankings are out. All that matters is, you know, can you win 2 football games? And you know, first of all, can you beat Michigan? So before you want to talk a rematch with Alabama, you know, you've got to be able to beat Michigan and get through that semifinal. And, hey, Alabama's got to do the exact same on the other side of the bracket.
You and I talked a couple weeks ago, Palmer, about the focus of this team. And we're talking about Georgia. And I think what was important, what you were saying, they took care of business week in and week out. But do you think, and I'll start off with this, we'll say lackadaisical opponent in Charleston Southern and Georgia Tech, did that allow them to have their guard down maybe a little bit heading into this? Because really they haven't been challenged. The Tennessee game was there, but the last 2 weeks of the regular season were essentially walkthroughs, and everyone touted as that. Did that get into the locker room, you feel like? Or was this just an example of Alabama outplaying completely?
You know, I think it's probably a combination of the two. I think it's more the latter than the former. I think that when you've got a game like this and Alabama had everything to play for, Georgia essentially knew that it was in to the playoffs regardless of the outcome on Saturday at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And I think that you saw the desperation that Alabama played with. They knew that they needed to win to be in very securely. And Georgia knew that it didn't need to win to be in. Now, you know, do I think that they absolutely wanted to beat Alabama and knock them out? Sure, but I don't think that there was that same level of desperation that Alabama was playing with. So I think that probably has the biggest factor in the outcome that we saw. I think that you've also got to give credit to the way that Alabama prepared. Alabama, you know, heard all the outside noise and was ready to go. You know, I think that I know that next time we see those two teams, you know, if we end up seeing those two teams again this season, Alabama won't be coming in as an underdog this time.
Yeah, what was it, a 6.5 point underdog? I think Alabama was the first time in 92, 93 games that Nick Saban was an underdog, something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the last time that Nick Saban was an underdog before that was the 2015 game against Georgia, where they blew Georgia out in Athens. And so, you know, it goes a long way back. And you know, typically, you know, Alabama isn't built on being an underdog. Let's just say it that way.
Yeah, we're talking with Palmer Thombs of Dawgs HQ over on 3sports.com. Palmer, I saw you at the Georgia Tech game. We were talking a little bit, and that's about as much as we were going to talk the whole time because that game was just there. I talked about the 2 games and kind of what happened with them, but this Alabama game, you know, obviously the noise around the program, but Kirby Smart's in the postgame presser. Obviously, you're a part of it. It's kind of, and a couple players said as well, this is kind of a gut check. It's a little bit of a reality check for them. Is this the best case scenario for Georgia team to be able to be knocked down a little bit to now kind of regroup? They have close to a month before they have to play this game against Michigan down in Miami.
Yeah, I think that it's certainly you can make that case, and you look at like what Davin Bellamy put it out on Twitter. I believe it was today, but at least I saw it today, and said when they lost to Auburn in 2017 that was a game that refocused them and woke them up. I think that this is a very similar thing where, as opposed to the two meetings in 2018 and those postseason games where that essentially ended Georgia's season, where there was no hope for a rematch. This one, you do have that hope if you're a Georgia fan, and I don't know whether you're hoping to get them or you're hoping that Cincinnati can knock them off and that you can take down the Bearcats instead. But I think that from the players' perspective, that certainly will serve as motivation. I think that Kirby said it after the game on Saturday, and he reiterated it again on Sunday, is that one of the best things that happened to Alabama this year was that loss at Texas A&M. That they were re-energized, refocused, had to lock in, knew that their backs were against the wall for the rest of the season, and knew that they had to be completely focused every day in practice, that they couldn't take it easy on any opponent. And so I think that that's certainly the case for Georgia. I think that probably would have been the case had they won that game. But I think it's definitely the case now because they know that they're beatable. They know that they're not invincible. And like Kirby said, these players are probably twice as likely to listen to them now as they would have been then had Georgia gone out and beaten Alabama. Because I think let's play the hypothetical here, and let's say that Georgia does go beat Alabama on last Saturday. You're really looking around and you're saying, well, hey, if we can beat Alabama, surely we can beat Clemson, or surely we can beat whoever we're going to end up playing. Surely we can beat Cincinnati, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oklahoma State, whoever. And that kind of attitude probably rolls into next season too, with the matchup against Oregon to start the year. I think that you probably think that you're invincible, and quite frankly, Georgia is not. They showed that on Saturday. I think everybody that could watch that game saw that. And I think that, it's good for Georgia to have lost that game from the perspective of they're going to be locked in. They're not going to be thinking that they are better than everybody else. They're going to know that they have to play their best game to win.
Yeah. They're going to have to play their best game, and it seems like then some. And a full 60 minutes, too. I think that's been the big gripe of some fans, is it never has been a full 60. Now, the good thing for fans is that it wasn't a game in the second half that you kind of you blew a lead. That was the first time it felt like forever that's happened.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Kirby Smart and you've led at the half 3 times against Alabama and that hasn't worked, why not try trailing?
Yeah, try trailing, and it just didn't work out. But I want to talk about that. Let's start defensively. And then we're going to get to the question that everyone seemingly wants to ask Kirby Smart, and he never really wants to give a straight answer. But first off, defensively, coming into the season, the secondary was a concern, not because of a lack of talent, just a lack of experience. Obviously, Darian Kendrick's been a great player. I think he just accepted an invite in the Reese's Senior Bowl down in Mobile after the season's over. You had Keely Ringo, who missed all of last season with a torn labrum. But, Palmer, is this or did we finally see what the lack of – I don't want to say big game experience, because now Keely Ringo's now played 11, 12 games, or 13 games now. He doesn't. It's not like he doesn't have experience, but the big game being tested. When you look back at the schedule, is that something you probably wish you would have had that game maybe week 5, week 6, week 7, something like that, and not then the biggest stage and primetime slot of the day?
Yeah, I think that that's certainly something that you could look at, and I mentioned it to someone going into the game, is that if you look at Darian Kendrick's history in some of these big games, he's been torched by Ohio State. He's been torched, twice by Ohio State, and add in LSU as well in that national championship game. I think that the part of the reason they brought him in is that he has played in some of these big games. But I think that he's also shown that he's been beatable in some of these big games. And so I don't know that if you're Georgia, obviously you have to play the hand that you're dealt in terms of a schedule. And they did that, the best as they could. Can't ask for much better than 12-0. I think that October slate was tough. Tougher than some folks might have expected going into the season, and maybe not as tough as some folks looked at it then. But I think that, a little bit of ways removed, you're looking at Arkansas finished in the top 25. Kentucky finished in the top 25. Clemson, who you played in the first week, finds their way back in. Auburn, struggled down the stretch, but at the time they were a ranked opponent. Same deal with Florida. They struggled, coming into that game and coming out of it as well. But I think that there were enough talented players there for the Gators that was a challenge to an extent. Not to the extent that Alabama is, not to the extent that they will see in the playoffs, whether that be Michigan in the first game or, Cincinnati or Alabama again. I certainly don't think it's the challenge that they faced and in Alabama this past Saturday or will face in a playoff team. But I think that they were challenged. I think that, where things, might have been hidden a little bit was because of the way that Georgia was able to get pressure. And Kirby admitted that too. He said, hey, maybe some of our deficiencies in the secondary were covered up by our ability to get pressure, pretty much at will. Anytime they felt like they needed it, they were able to get it. And I think that, you really saw the impact of not having that on Saturday. I think that, and it was a little bit surprising too, given the fact that Alabama has struggled to protect the quarterback. Had given up 7 sacks the week before against Auburn. Had given up 4 sacks in the loss to Texas A&M, 4 sacks against LSU, 4 against Arkansas. They give up 0. So big credit to Doug Marrone and the way that he and that offensive line stepped up to the challenge. Big credit to Nick Saban. Big credit to Bryce Young for his ability to get the ball out quickly. I think that, that was certainly something that gave Georgia fits on defense. And as a result, you saw, guys, the inability to get pressure put the pressure on the secondary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, because it looked like, Nolan Smith watched his post-game press conference and they took ownership of it. I mean, it's not, you don't want to leave your secondary out to dry. That was one of the big things. Switching over to the offensive side, and this is the question that, was asked yesterday in the Orange Bowl. Everyone knows where this one's going. Listen, they're having the Burlsworth Trophy ceremony later on tonight. I think it's 8 o'clock, and I don't know if you're keeping an eye on that. Stetson Bennett's in attendance. What he's done, Palmer, is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's you give him a pat on the back. I mean, he's done a fantastic job, and I'll give him credit. The only team that he's really just been unable to conquer is indeed an Alabama team. And so Stetson Bennett, whether he wins tonight's award or not, I think what's very interesting for it, Palmer, is you give him the props. He's worked his butt off. But to beat Alabama, to me, you have to have a dynamic playmaker. You have to make the decision making needs to be a little bit better. What did you see on Saturday that to you means JT Daniels should get that nod in the Orange Bowl? Whether it happens or not, you're not Todd Monken, you're not in the headset. But for you and personally, and we've talked about this a little bit, I know you feel like JT Daniels should be the starter. Why is that, and what did you see on Saturday that proves that decision in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go on the record saying it here. I don't think it'll happen. I think that Kirby will probably continue to roll with Stetson. But I think if there were a time to make the change, it would be now, given the fact that, and I will say this, I completely understand Kirby continuing to roll with Stetson up to this point. His ability to make plays with his legs, got Georgia to a 12-0 record. Now, do I think that JT Daniels probably could have done that as well against the schedule that they played? Yeah, he probably could have. But I will say, it's kind of the hot hand deal. You're rolling with the hot hand, and that certainly has been Stetson Bennett. He's been a leader. The team has bought into what he's had to offer, and I think that there's certainly a case to be made for him to continue to start because he's gotten you to this point. He earned you this playoff spot. But at the same time, I think that going back to that idea of him making plays with his legs, he didn't really do that on Saturday. There were times he moved the chains a couple of times, but he didn't do it, with the consistency that we've seen it from him. He wasn't as aggressive in taking off and running. I think that there were times where he tried to be a Johnny Manziel type guy and run around and make the heroic throw. And, during the regular season, we saw Stetson take off and just, tuck his head down and run and, take a hit on from a linebacker. He's been willing to do that. And I don't know whether that's because it was Alabama and he felt like he had to be the hero, because of the magnitude of the game, because of something else. But Stetson Bennett was not that same player on Saturday. Now, he played pretty well in terms of his stat line. If you had told me that Stetson was going to throw for 340 yards and 3 touchdowns, I probably would have said Georgia was going to win. But the 2 interceptions is certainly what cost him, and that inability to, that decision to not make the run with his legs. And so, that first one, he rolled it out of the pocket to the right and tried to make too much out of it and threw the interception. Very much so reminded me of his interception, his last interception against Alabama last year, trying to make too much, something out of nothing, and just threw the ball across the middle. You even said it on Saturday. I think that the second interception was simply a mistake. He didn't see the safety, but that's something that he has seen time and time again this season. So I don't know what it was. He was asked if he felt off, and he said he didn't. He just didn't see certain things. But to me, I think that if you're going to beat Alabama, and it all goes back. It's, to me, playing Alabama starts with the way that you're able to defend them. Because that offense is so explosive. That offense has so many weapons. Now, granted, they'll be down one, and John Mechie won't be playing with the torn ACL. But I do think that they have so many weapons, even guys outside of him. Ja'Cory Brooks is a 5-star wide receiver that made a game-changing play against Auburn. He's a guy that can step up, especially given the amount of time between that SEC championship game and this next matchup for Alabama, and certainly between the SEC, the 2 matchups that Georgia would play them. I think that they're going to have guys that step up, that you can expect to see step up. And so to me, there's only so much you can do to stop that offense. I don't think that you can really stop them. I think you can slow them down. So I think that you're going to have to count on them putting up points. And to be able to beat Alabama, you're going to have to put up points with them. And for me, JT Daniels is the quarterback that gives Georgia the best chance to do that. He's able to get the ball out downfield accurately, quickly. He might not be be able to make plays with his legs. But like I said, if Stetson's not going to do that, the mobility aspect is equal there, because Stetson's not doing it and JT can't do it. But, in terms of what they're able to do outside of that, I think that JT is a more, polished passer. So to me, I think that JT Daniels gives Georgia the best chance to win. I think that Georgia absolutely can beat Michigan with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. I haven't done a deep dive into the Wolverines, but at this point, I would say they probably will beat Michigan with Stetson Bennett at quarterback. But I think that looking ahead to that potential matchup with Alabama, that potential rematch, JT Daniels gives Georgia the best chance to beat Alabama.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, is the danger, and I'm going to talk about this later on in the show, but the danger is if you do, does that solidify Stetson, the starter, was saying, well, he got us past Michigan. But I ask you this, and you kind of touched on it. You talked a little bit about defense before we let you go. Palmer, what has to change in these next 4 weeks, in your opinion? I know not worrying so much about the opponent, but what has to change for Georgia and themselves? Because this is a team that is talented enough to beat Alabama. For the past 4 times they've played them, they've been right there. I don't think the talent gap that we've seen in recent years is really there anymore. But I think it's really interesting to see that it comes to mental miscues. Like you said, Stetson not being, I guess, aggressive in the running game. But what has to change for you, if you just had to name a couple things, in order for Georgia to be, holding up that CFP trophy January 8th, 9th, whenever it is? 10th. They back it up every
You were so close.
10th.
You were so close, Bryce. Now, I will say, and I asked this question to Kirby after the game, and he gave me the answer that I expected to get, but it was, they can't turn the ball over. You can't lose the third down battle. You can't have busted coverages. You can't give up those big plays. And he's absolutely right in all that. But I think that where Georgia needs to put an emphasis is its natural ability to get pressure rather than bringing pressure, on defense. And putting that secondary, in a spot where they are susceptible to giving up those big plays, putting them, under pressure, under the gun. I think that you're going to have to give a little bit of help back there and hope that your guys up front, whether that's Jalen Carter, Devontae Wyatt, Trayvon Walker, Nolan Smith, Robert Beal, N'Kobe Dean, Channing Tindall, Quay Walker, that front seven, they've got to be able to get pressure on their own without necessarily, bringing them all. I think that you can't count on bringing 7 and putting 4 back in coverage against this Alabama team. You're going to have to drop more guys back into coverage if you are to play them. And I don't think that Michigan is going to test them in that way. I think that they might try to, given what they saw in Georgia's inability to defend it. But I do think that they are more of a true run-first team, and that really favors Georgia. I think offensively, you want to see George Pickens get more involved. Had 5 targets on Saturday, caught 2 of those, including the big 37-yarder. I think that, and I mentioned it to people in the press box that were sitting around me, you could, very clearly see the Georgia fans rise out of their seats, as Pickens was going up for that ball. And they were very excited to see him back. You heard the cheer at Georgia Tech when he caught that first pass. But I think it was even more so at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So I think that you're going to want to see him be a playmaker, a big factor in this next game. And I think ultimately you've got to just regroup. You've got to understand what you did to get here. Put that game behind you. It doesn't matter at this point. Like I said, it's a new season. Everything that happened before Selection Sunday and before that, announcement, that's all out of, should be out of their minds now, because now it is all about beating Michigan and playing their best football game. Kirby has said it all year long that they are, still trying to play their best football game each and every week. And I don't think that Georgia has played its best football game. I think that they've, in certain areas they've played very well, but they haven't been able to put together a very, complete performance against a team like Alabama. They haven't played many teams like Alabama, teams that can test them that way. But I think that, that's what it's going to take to beat Alabama and to beat, to raise that college football playoff trophy on January 10th.
January the 10th it is. No, and you talk about George Pickens. We got a chance to ask him yesterday. He's not his old George self, but I'll say 80% George Pickens is still a heck of a lot better than a lot of receivers in college football. So, Palmer, we appreciate it as always. Obviously, you made the transition to On 3. Talk to the people. Where can they find you for coverage leading up to Miami, where you're obviously enjoying – you're going to enjoy the game, I know, but you're also going to enjoy what Miami has to offer as well. But let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, I might have to get a spray tan before I go down there, just so that I'm not burning up in the sun. But yeah, like you said, I made the transition to On 3 this year, Dawgs HQ. Certainly excited about everything that we've done over there and everything that we will continue to do in an exciting time, in terms of college football coverage. Obviously, you've got the playoff, but you've got National Signing Day, early signing day coming up here before too long. And so it's been all SEC championship in the lead up to that, and now it's all signing day, all recruiting. We'll certainly still have you covered when it comes to team stuff, but be sure to check out our work over at Dawgs HQ.
Appreciate it as always, Palmer. And Ralph threw in the chat, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, he said he's here for the spray tan. So we appreciate it, man. You have a great rest of your night, and thanks as always. Well, that's Palmer Thombs. When we come back, we got more coverage talking about Georgia, Alabama, and kind of leading up to what early signing has to offer. Appreciate it, Palmer.
Thanks, Bryce.
That was Palmer Thombs. We appreciate him as always. A great guy, a great opportunity to talk, get a little insight on what's happening in Athens as well. When we come back, we're going to bring Ralph back onto the show, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of his thoughts and how impressed we were with Bryce Young and what he was really able to do. An impressive effort all the way around, and what Alabama, some of the changes they made from the Iron Bowl to the SEC title game when we come back.
Cook's Place began serving our signature hot dogs in 1985 from a cart on Broadway. We still serve the best hot dogs and scrambled dogs in town at the corner of Moon and Miller Road and at the landings. Our friendly staff won't let you leave hungry. Come in and eat to the beat with our 50s jukebox. Cook's Place, fast service, great people, awesome food. What are you waiting for?
Back here on the Crowded Booth Live, Ralph, you joined us. You had some issues, but Palmer provided some great insight on kind of what happened.
Doesn't he always, though?
He always does. Ralph, as you adjust your mic as you do every single week,
Got to.
Palmer hit on a lot of keys, and we talked a lot about Georgia already, but I want to ask you about Bryce Young. How impressed were you with a guy who, honestly, in my opinion, is going to be the Heisman Trophy winner? He cemented the case this past Saturday in Atlanta in Mercedes-Benz. How impressed were you with the play of Bryce Young?
Well, I think everything was clicking for him, honestly. I felt like he was hitting all his passes in the short game. The deep ball was there. He got all the calls he needed to. I think his offense, for one, Bryce Young played well, but secondly, his offensive line played their best game in their entire life, I feel like. Their O-line finally stepped up, made the blocks that we know they can make, and, just how great they are and how talented they can be. They struggled against Auburn, played a great game against Georgia, and then Bryce Young just does what he does best, and that's just make plays. Give Alabama a chance to be in every single game. Even the A&M game, you take Bryce Young out of that game. Y'all mentioned the A&M game. That was a gut punch for Alabama. Bryce Young still had one of his best games that game. He threw for almost 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. He didn't play bad. I don't think he's played bad really all year. Bryce Young is, like you said, he cemented himself as the Heisman already. In my opinion, one of the best single seasons we've seen from an Alabama quarterback in a while. Obviously, take Mac Jones out from last year because it was just a crazy year last year. But what Bryce Young was able to do was just make plays. Just get away from that Georgia pass rush, which honestly, Bryce, I don't think there was much of a pass rush. And I feel like Georgia struggled on that defensively. But as Palmer said, though, you got to give it up to Bryce Young for how great he played.
Yeah, and Ralph, I think the biggest thing with that is you hit the nail on the head, what he was able to do. And Palmer talked a lot about it. His offensive line played well. But Nakobe Dean and Nolan Smith both said they did a lot of naked bootlegs, and they got him out. And I remember when they were playing in the same building opening weekend, you talked about how good he looked throwing on the run. He's a dynamic athlete. He's probably going to win the Heisman Trophy. This team showed to what do you, when you look at it, what was the biggest difference from, let's say, what was the biggest difference from Iron Bowl, which I know you watched that game, to this week? To me, it was night and day. The offensive line played better.
Yeah, it's the offensive
what to you
line.
stood out?
Well, it's offensive line, the fact that he was comfortable on Saturday. In the Iron Bowl, he wasn't. That's what Derek Mason said before the game. We want to make number 9 uncomfortable. And they did. Georgia did not. They were able to. Alabama was able to let Bryce Young run around, get in the back, get comfortable back there, scramble a little bit, make some big plays, and even if his receivers weren't covered, Georgia was spying them with a defensive lineman. He's going to win that one-on-one any day of the week. Bryce Young was set up perfectly for this game. I don't think Georgia really did a lot of good things to help themselves out. As much as I hate, I'm stunned saying that defensively, Georgia did not help themselves out. They just kind of shot themselves in the foot. Weren't making the big play. Like I think you and I talked about it personally. Georgia's, 1 or 2 big defensive plays away from being back in this ball game. Bryce Young did not allow you to make that play because he was just too good on Saturday. I think, you got the best of Bryce Young. We saw what he can do against the best defense. And like I said again, he submitted himself as the Heisman. I don't think there's any debate about that. The only person I would debate is Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. I think he had a terrific year.
Mm-hmm.
His last 2 games have been outstanding for them, honestly. It's been, if you watched him, Ohio State-Michigan game, 3.5 sacks. The Big Ten Championship, I think he had 2.5 sacks. He broke the all-time record for single-season sacks by a Michigan player. He had a great year, but
that's pretty good, Ralph. That's pretty good.
Yeah, but it's going to be overlooked because Bryce Young was outstanding this year. 4 interceptions this year.
46 it's something like it was absolutely ridiculous. And that was the thing too, Ralph. He didn't make the mistake. And that was what to me stood out in that.
43 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 4,300 yards. To me, there's no one better this year.
What else can you say about that?
And that's what Georgia got, though. You didn't get the bad offensive line play. You didn't get the undisciplined receiver play for the Auburn got. You didn't get the miscues on defense. Mm-hmm. You got the Alabama Crimson Tide that Nick Saban has developed in the past 10 years.
You got that, and I think it was important that Alabama did that. I told you, Ralph. There was no way they were going to play that bad in back-to-back weeks.
And you know what?
And credit to the staff for having them ready.
As much as I did not want that to happen, I wanted to see Georgia win this game. I thought this was the holy grail season for Georgia, but a lot just happened. I feel like in this game that big play after big play. I thought when John Mechie went down, I felt bad for Alabama, but they're going to have someone step up. They didn't have to. When Jamison Williams is your best receiver on your team, you don't need anyone to step up. I mean, that dude's stupid fast. I mean, he's crazy. That's one problem with Georgia right now, though, is their secondary was getting burnt.
It was getting burnt, and I think the secondary was ineffective because the front seven was ineffective. Georgia's been able to mask that with a pass rush that's been elite all season. But Ralph, I think the biggest question comes to is they're going to have to stop them. You mentioned it, the Holy Grail season. It's still out in front of them. I'll tell you one thing. There's a lot of Georgia fans, Ralph, that would not mind not having an SEC championship ring, but having a national championship trophy over Alabama. All that to say, Stetson or JT, in your opinion, who has it had to be? Can Georgia win it all with Stetson at quarterback?
You can. I don't think there's nothing wrong with it. If I'm going to bring up a comment real quick.
Yeah, my man Gavin Hart, Stetson can win games. And Palmer hit the nail on the head that he wasn't able to do that. If you're listening to the radio, Gavin Hart over on YouTube, Stetson can win games when Georgia is able to run the ball effectively. They weren't able to. You put the game on his shoulders, and I just don't think that's Stetson's game. Not that he's bad. It's just not his game.
I don't think, like I said, he's not the big game quarterback. He's not going to be there the one that it's the 2-minute drive. Stetson's out there throwing 35-yard dimes on the sideline. He's just not that quarterback. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not how he's able to play. In this situation, I still think you go out with Stetson to start the game out. I mean, he is your leader. He's your captain on this team, in my opinion. He's led you to this year. But also, you don't have a starting quarterback go into this game against Michigan. I think it's a QB battle till the day before the game. Mm-hmm. I think JT Daniels deserved a shot. Stetson obviously deserved a shot, but you gotta see if JT can play. You have 4 weeks to see who can win this battle. Get the guys a few days off, let them rest, get their mind right, and get ready for practice because it's go time. I think what Kirby said it was everyone's back to square one.
Yeah,
whoever
it's a brand new season.
Whoever can manage the best out of these next 4 weeks is the one who comes out is the winner. Yeah. So we have to be our best mentally and physically.
You have to be your best mentally and physically, Ralph. But I think the biggest thing for me, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, Stetson Bennett's talented. If you go to other schools, they want a guy like Stetson Bennett on their team. But I'll say this, and I'll even go as far as saying this. I think that Kirby is guilty of a little too much loyalty. And what I mean by that is I think he embraces the underdog. I think he likes Stetson's makeup. I mean, give Stetson a hand clap and a round of applause. The kid has earned the opportunity to be where he is today. Nobody gave him a shot. I think Kirby likes that. But how much can you be loyal to a fault that it hurts your team into winning a national championship? You can look at stars, you can look at ratings, and I get all that. But at the end of the day, who gives you the better chance? In my opinion, that's JT Daniels. You have to have a playmaker. You've got to have a guy that can stretch the field. And like Palmer said earlier, if Stetson is not aggressive in taking off and running, then it limits the mobility. It eliminates that completely from the equation. If you take the mobility aspect out of Stetson Bennett, JT Daniels is better. He's better in that aspect of the game, Ralph. And I think that's one thing. We're going to end our Georgia-Alabama conversation right there. Obviously, these two teams have, Ralph, a lot to play for. Alabama heading to Dallas for the Cotton Bowl against Cincinnati. And then And then down to Miami goes Georgia and Michigan. Georgia for the first time since 1960. That's going to be a fun game. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But I also want to touch on, Ralph, some of our favorite bowl matchups that came out this past Sunday. How do we feel about some bowl matchups? What are some that you're looking forward to? When we go right back, Ralph, we have our newest sponsor. We're going to hear from them here in just a second. I know you're excited about it. I know our fans are excited about it. And, Ralph, the best thing is when you get done with it, you smell better.
Your soap is ugh, and your body wash is a synthetic detergent, but you're not a dish. You're a man. Switch to Dr. Squatch Natural Soap for Men. For men who build things. Open pickle jars on the first try. Slay dragons. And let their daughters braid their hair. Men who like to feel good and smell. Titillating. Dr. Squatch takes you places you never thought you'd go. Naked.
Absolutely have to love that, Ralph. Butterscotch, fantastic thing. We love them. They appreciate us as well. So, Ralph, let's get down to it as we wrap up tonight's show. The best bowl game, not from location or anything like that, but just maybe what is a matchup that you're really excited to watch and why?
The Sugar Bowl, baby. Baylor versus Ole Miss. I think
Give it to us.
the one best defense in the Big 12, the only best defense in the Big 12, in my opinion, against one of the best offenses in the country with one of the most creative offensive minds in the country with Lane Kiffin and Dave Aranda is the guy he has to go get. I mean, it's gonna be a great game. I really do believe this was the one game they really wanted to happen after Saturday's game results. I feel like the Baylor versus Ole Miss game was probably the top one that we're going to choose for the Sugar Bowl because I don't see who else you can choose for this game to make it more exciting. I think Baylor's a great choice. I think they have a great defense. They played extremely well against Oklahoma State. They were able to get in the backfield, make some big stops late in the game. You didn't see that fourth and goal stop to win the game was impressive. It was incredible. The whole game was fun to watch. Ole Miss this whole year has just been fun to watch. Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral have been one of the great coach and quarterback duos right now. Matt Corral has already announced he's going to the NFL, so he wants to play one more game, go out with a big bang. Hopefully, he'll have all his receivers back so they have a full, healthy team, which they haven't really had most of the year. Now, if you look at it now, their schedule, if Ole Miss doesn't lose to Auburn, you could possibly say they could have snuck in if Alabama lost on Saturday. But
and if they didn't lose to Alabama as bad as they did, I think that's the one thing. Yeah.
Well, I think they got a little cocky going into that game. I'm not going to say who did, but someone did. I feel like they just kind of.
I think people can infer.
Well, if you go for it on fourth down like 5 times in a row and you get 3 out of 5, and then you start going for it and they just start stopping you, you got to change something. Kick some field goals, get some points. But to me, this is one of the most fun games to watch. My sister will be in attendance. She's an Ole Miss rebel herself. So she'll be down in New Orleans watching this. Be her first bowl game experience, and it's a great place to be. That's where I actually went to my first bowl game, actually second bowl game. But when Troy played in the New Orleans Bowl in 2017, obviously it's not as good as the Sugar Bowl, but
same stadium.
That stadium, if you have never been to, what's it now, Caesars Palace Superdome?
It's still Mercedes-Benz, I thought. It's maybe not. I don't know.
It's now like the Caesars like Superdome or something like that now. But still, it's huge. It's going to be rocking, though. I feel like there's 2 great fan bases for the travel of this game. Ole Miss is going to travel really well because it's a big game, and obviously, if you know anything about Ole Miss, they'll fit perfectly down there in New Orleans.
They will. And both schools are relatively close, too, that they can get down there. It kind of meets them in the middle. That's kind of nice. Ralph, I'm going to give you a second one. I don't know if you saw it over there on the same thing. I'm going to give you my best bowl. I'm going Texas A&M Wake Forest. And I think this is going to be fun because Wake Forest's offense, to me, is unbelievable, Ralph. They ended this season, the regular season, have an offense that averages 41.2 points and 469 yards per game. You compound that with a Texas A&M defense that's been very good this season. I think one thing's got to give. A&M also has the ability to put up points. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. I went away from the traditional New Year's Six in that realm. I think it's going to be a ton of fun to do that. Now, Ralph, before we wrap up tonight's show, we always have to do – what'd you say?
Can we do our least favorite bowl game?
What's your least favorite bowl game?
Iowa versus Kentucky. That's going to be the worst bowl game to watch. There's no doubt about it. That'll be a barn burner down there in Orlando. If you're watching that game over anything else, there's something wrong with you. That game should be played at 9:30 in the morning, so no one has to watch it.
Much like Auburn in the Birmingham Bowl against Houston.
You're going to watch Auburn get smoked by Houston, the most electric football player in college football. Marcus Jones, baby.
Marcus Jones is an unreal, dynamic football player. Ralph, give me your predictions. We're a month out. We're going to do a deep dive in this as we get closer. What are your predictions for the college football playoff? How do you see this rolling? We'll start 1 versus 4, Alabama-Cincinnati. It's a 12.5-point spread when the game was announced. I imagine that's going to fluctuate sometime in between then. John Mechie is out for the season with a torn ACL. What is your thoughts on that?
Just one thing. I'm pretty sure it's Kobe Bryant is the corner for Cincinnati. That's been really good this year. Him and Jamison Williams will be a fun matchup to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think Jamison Williams is a little bit better, but still, great matchup to watch. Alabama's going to roll, though. There's just no doubt about it. They're just too good.
I want to get this right here before we get into it. Thoughts on UNC USC? It'll be a snooze fest, Gavin. North Carolina, they're disappointed they're in this game. South Carolina, meanwhile, is excited. I'm going to take the Gamecocks because I think they want to be there more. And we all know, Auburn fans, Georgia fans know, there's a certain aspect of not wanting to be in a bowl game. And I don't think North Carolina is very happy with where they are. And the Dukes Mayo, no, they're not there. I don't know where they are. I think maybe
they are. I think they are Dukes Mayo. I haven't pulled up.
I have no idea. I'm not sure. Ref, I'm going to give you the down. Dukes Mayo Bowl. Yeah.
What a bowl game. Oh, did you hear what happened about this game, though?
Go ahead.
The owner of the bowl has said that whoever wins the game, if they dump a Gatorade gallon thing of mayo on them, of Duke's Mayo on them, they will donate like $4,000 to their whatever charity they want.
$4,000
or something like that. It might have been more.
It's got to be more, in my opinion.
I mean,
mayo.
If someone doesn't,
you know how I feel about.
I'm going to be irate.
You know how I feel about mayonnaise.
I mean, throw it back to week 1 of college football, Clemson versus Georgia, and then Duke's Mayo kickoff, where fans were dumping mayo on each other and eating it out of the jar, middle of the game. If you don't know, in the Southeast in September is not cold. That mayo was not cold. It had to be just warm mayo. That's just got to be nasty.
All right, listen, the viewers and listeners are going to throw up if you keep talking about lukewarm mayo. I think Alabama covers over Cincinnati in hindsight. I think they win this game by at least 2 touchdowns. I think they're just more talented. And say a prayer for the man on TikTok who continues to say that Cincinnati wants Alabama. Ralph, real quickly,
he's going to be abused.
I think this is going to be the best game that we're going to see.
1,000%. I'm excited.
Michigan versus Georgia. I mean, I'll say this and I'll go first. I think Georgia wins this game. And your mom, Leslie Leary, out there put in the comment, it's actually $10K, Ralph. I wouldn't do it for $1 million. You wouldn't be able to pour mayo on me.
I'd do it for 1,000 if you give it.
I'm sure.
I'm not doing it for charity.
Don't tempt Ralph with a good time. That's all I got to say about that. Ralph, Michigan versus Georgia. To me, this is strength on strength. 2 physical teams. I've got Georgia winning this game just because it plays into what Georgia's really good at. We saw a team that earlier in the year that was kind of very physical, Arkansas, come in. I think that's a good example of kind of what Michigan's going to do, maybe heightened a little bit. But this is the big thing. Michigan is peaking at the right time. And they're not going to be scared. I don't think from a talent level they're on the same playing field as Alabama and Georgia, but they're playing very well. And that doesn't mean that they're that far behind. They're still very good. I think that Georgia will pull this one out because it plays into what Georgia wants to. Now, the danger in that, Ralph, is I think that's going to lead to Georgia fans getting their hearts broken once again in a national championship game because it does go right in the Orange Bowl. And I hope that the coaching staff can see that. But I'll go with this right here. What do you think about this game? I mean, to me, if you just said bowl games, don't worry about the national championship. To me, this is the best game, the best matchup that you're going to have all the whole time, except for an Ole Miss Baylor, which is obviously a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this pulls right into what Georgia wants to do. Right? This is a mano-a-mano. Who's going to be the better up front, honestly? I think both teams have really great defenses. Respectfully, Georgia's is probably a little bit better just due because they play better teams, in my opinion. But like you said, Michigan is getting hot at the right time. That victory over Ohio State, I think they were underestimating how good Michigan really is. Like they really just dominated Ohio State out there. This is going to be something for me to watch. Is watch how Jim Harbaugh reacts to this game. He's very calm. Not really, nervous about most games. I mean, this is a big game here. This is probably his biggest game in his coaching career, college-wise. He's I think he never beat Ohio State before that last game.
Yeah.
So, excuse me. So this right here to me is an exciting matchup because Jim Harbaugh versus Kirby Smart in a game where I think both coaches are somewhat similar when it comes to recruiting wise. And that's one thing that people are going to miss is recruiting wise is that Kirby Smart said in his interview yesterday, I'm hitting the ground recruiting. He was recruiting probably yesterday while he's doing that interview in his car. Jim Harbaugh was late from a plane flight, probably going to recruiting also. To me, this is one of those games like where both coaches coach the exact same way, fire each other up. They're great motivational speakers for their teams. They're going to get these teams excited for this game. I think this could be a game that people overlook because Michigan still could actually win this game.
Oh yeah, Michigan's more than capable.
I'm not saying Georgia's going to screw up or anything. I'm not saying that Michigan's better. I just think don't overlook Michigan if you're a Georgia fan. I think that everyone did that last week over Alabama. I think some fans overlooked Alabama like, well, they struggled against Auburn. They've already lost one game. They're struggling against LSU and Arkansas. It's Alabama. This is Michigan. They beat Ohio State. They beat them bad too.
Yeah,
this is not a bad team. Don't overlook Michigan, please.
Going back to the Alabama-Georgia game, I want to share one more thing with us, Ralph, and viewers can see it on the screen. If you can't and you're listening to the radio, what this is the fumble that Bryce Young had, and you see on the picture right here, Nolan Smith is in perfect position to get it. This Alabama fumble / recovery that Bryce Young got happened with 56 seconds left in the second quarter, Ralph. It was still a 17-17 game. 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, which also took us into the third quarter, Georgia was down by 14 points. A turning point in the football game in that moment right there as well. But listen, things like that happen all the time, Ralph, in football, and it's going to be a ton of fun to see how this wraps up. Let's end the show, Ralph, with our overrated, underrated, and equally rated. We didn't do it. I hate that we didn't get Palmer on to do that. But I'm going to go with sports spread, food-wise. So we're just going to go with wings. Are wings overrated, underrated, or just right there?
I think they're right there. I mean, if you don't like wings at a football game, something's wrong with you.
I would agree. I'm also going to roll with this, Ralph. Blue cheese dressing.
Don't make me say it. Underrated.
Blue cheese dressing is overrated. Highly overrated.
Just because you don't like blue cheese dressing does not mean it's overrated.
That's all the time we have for today. We appreciate everyone as always. It's been a fantastic show. Ralph, we had our guest Palmer Thombs on. Make sure to do that as well. That was our final segment of the show brought to you by Climate Control Heating and Air. Your heating and air needs serving the area since 1983. Ralph, anything left for the people as they get ready for their week? Well, what do you have for them?
Well, if you're not doing anything tonight, there is a win game going on at Monday Night Football where a opening kickoff went into the stands. Not in the sidelines. In the back of the end zone, about 12 rows up.
Also, shout out to Callaway High School. They dropped to Thomasville this past weekend.
Carver
what a 2-year run. Carver will play in the state championship against Benedictine up at Georgia State Stadium as well. Ralph, we appreciate it as always. Thank you so much for your time, for my time as well. This has been Crowded Booth Live here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Make sure to follow us and check us out on all social media.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Coon.